Good morning and welcome to the Thursday morning devotion, encouragement, and prayer time from Impact Prayer Ministry. My name is Tom Lemler. I'm a staff member of the Dear of Christ, as well as the director of Impact Prayer Ministry. Today, as we continue through the devotional book, Serving God, Devotions for Active, the idea this week of contentment as a part of our serving as kind of a foundational element that drives us and draws us to a greater service of God as we serve people more consistently, more faithfully. Today's specific topic in this series is contentment with basic needs. Paul writes that he talks about being content. If I have food and shelter, with those things I'll be content. That life does not, Jesus taught, consist of an abundance of possessions. And as we live life with this contentment, it's probably good, especially as Americans, to sit back and evaluate, what are my real needs? And sit with God for a while. I write in the book that it's fairly easy for our culture to convince us that the things that we want are really things that we need. It's easy because that's our desire. We're really good at justifying all of the things that our eyes see that we convince ourselves we can't live without. But serving others at some level requires a contentment with what God provides, a contentment with the basic needs of life. Not a resignment to that's all we get, all we can have, but a contentment if that is all we have. There's so many times that we become enslaved to the stuff that we think we have to have, to such an extent that even when the promptings of God's Spirit within us call us to serve, we feel that we can't. We've so heavily indebted ourselves to the things that we want that the time isn't available, the resources, the money, the whatever it takes to do the service God has called us to do, we just can't. Because our stuff is more important. And yet, in the reverse aspect of that, how many times do we see a person in need and choose not to share because we feel or say or decide that they don't need such and such? It's not a real need. We need it. We couldn't live without it. We've gone into debt to obtain it for ourselves. We can't imagine giving it up. But why would I share? I don't really need. You see, we have this dual mind when it comes to needs. We don't evaluate the needs of others anywhere close to the way we evaluate our own needs. And as Christians, God has called us to rise above the ways of this world, the ways of the human flesh, to look for his ways, which are more pure, they're higher, they're goodness and righteousness. And to live in those ways, and to walk in those ways, and to serve in those ways. It's one of the reasons that as the church began to form in the New Testament, in the book of Acts, we see that the believers would meet together. And it says from time to time, those that had property would sell it and share from the proceeds. Textually, it really doesn't sound like it's their home. It's property they're not using, or property that been added on to their land or their holdings or whatever. But they looked around and discovered that they had something that would benefit someone else. And it wasn't something that they could, in good faith, hold on to. And we read in that group of early Christians, it says there was not a needy person among them. We get so caught up in collecting and accumulating. We get so caught up in the scope of need in the world that we become blinded to sharing with our own family, to noticing the needs of those closest to us. There are a lot of good organizations that do good works all around the world. And I believe we need things like that. But we also need individuals like you and me that can see a need and do something about it. To learn a contentment with the basic needs, to realize accurately what we have that is excess, that could help others, that we could live without if we really wanted to. You see, there's a lot of discussion in today's political culture of socialism, and are we moving towards that as a nation? And there's discussion among some circles of, is socialism a Christian principle? And I would say not in the way it's been practiced on earth, at least. I understand why people try to make the connections, but to is a practice of God's people, of caring for one another, of choosing. You may remember the story of Ananias and Sapphira, and they kind of liked the attention that Barnabas got because he sold a piece of land, and everybody's and shared the proceeds with those in need, and everybody said, "Wow, what an incredible guy!" And it appears that Ananias and Sapphira thought, "Well, we can be noteworthy, we can be famous, we can be lifted up in the eyes of the community," and so they sold a piece of property. But They kept some of the proceeds for themselves, and the rest they gave to the apostles to use for the needs of the people. But they passed it off as if they had done the same thing as Barnabas. When questioned about it, they assured the apostles that yes, this is what we sold the property for, and we've given everything. And the condemnation that brought about their death was that they lied. It wasn't that they didn't share everything. In fact, they are told that it was their property. They could keep it or they could sell it. They could share it. It was theirs. They didn't have to give all of the proceeds. It wasn't a forced redistribution of anything. With God was they misrepresented as being more noble. And that's the serving with contentment is we have and say to ourselves, that's something that could help others. And I could learn to live without. And we're honest about it. You see, serving with contentment with our basic needs says, I have more to give than I thought I did because I have more than I need. And God helps us. If we sit and listen to his word, we sit and listen to his spirit within us, he helps us to refine. And there's so many times we read through scripture these principles of sharing out of our abundance, even when we don't feel we have an abundance. And God blessing beyond what we could imagine. Even in the Old Testament times, the people were taught about sharing with God and giving sacrificially and being honest in their gifts to God. And they're told that if you do these things, then God would hold back the devourers, the pests, the things that would destroy what you do have. Sometimes we work so hard to protect the things that we've accumulated. And then we lose them anyway. God says when we learn contentment with our basic needs, we free ourselves to serve more fully. And when we serve more fully, he consistently pours out his blessings into our life such that we cannot contain them all. And he does that because he knows that we're going to serve others with them. Today, as we spend time praying, I would encourage you to think about what you need. And then ask yourself, is that what God says I need? In the midst of all of this, it would be unfair to complete the devotion without being clear that our basic need is Jesus. And am I content with Jesus? Would you spend some time today praying with me? Father, thank you that you are a God that loves us, that you watch out for us, that you've created your body, the church, to be a family, to care for one another, to love for to love one another, to look out for one another. to teach, to encourage, to challenge, to rebuke, to correct, to convict, all kinds of things that you've called us to do. You've called us to serve others using the things that you've given us. So, Father, today help us to examine our collection of stuff and help us to know within our spirit, to know accurately how much we're enslaved to that stuff and how much we've learned to be content with or without it. And Father, as our contentment with the very basic needs of life grows, may we be more open to sharing and giving, helping others. May we see greater value in people than we do in the accumulation of wealth and stuff that goes with it. Father, may we be honest with one another about the things we need, about the things we have, about how we help or don't help. Father, as I pray today, I ask that we would recognize fully our real need is you. Our real need is that relationship with Jesus. Father, as we share from what you've given us, may we never fail to share Jesus. And Father, as we've talked this past week about contentment and in a lot of different ways, may we continually learn. May we continually grow. May our growth and contentment help us to serve others better, to serve others more fully, to serve others more honestly, in more helpful ways than ever before. Father, as I pray for the children in our homes, our schools, our churches, our communities, I pray that you would help us to guide them into a life of contentment. It's so difficult when classmates have things that they don't, and they want them so badly, and their attitudes towards the parents go downhill fast when they don't get everything they want. Kind of like us. And yet teach us ways to show, to model, to help them learn contentment. Father, may our involvement of our children in serving others, serving those with great needs, especially when we compare them to what we have, help them to see how fortunate and blessed they are if they have more than their basic needs, if they have more than food and shelter. Father, as we live life, may we raise up a generation that serve faithfully, that can see needs and see how you've blessed beyond the needs. God, as we live life today, may you open our eyes to see the stuff that we've accumulated and how it can be helpful to someone else. May we be more willing to share than ever before. May we notice. Father, while it is true that Jesus taught that the poor would always be among us, may we do a better job within our own family, and then within our own church family, and then within our own community. Of learning contentment so that we could share with those who really are in need. And that together we could rejoice and lift up Jesus so that many would be drawn to him. It's in his name that I pray. Amen. This has been the Thursday morning devotion, encouragement, and prayer time from Impact Prayer Ministry. Thank you so much for joining me. I do pray that your day is greatly blessed by God so that you can be a blessing to others. Have a great day.